So will the benefits outweigh the cost to taxpayers? Joining me to discuss this more is Matthew Lesh, the head of research at the Adam Smith Institute, and Sam Tarring, Jeremy Corbyn's former political advisor and currently the National Political Officer at the TSSA. Gentlemen, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Matthew, if I could firstly start with you. I mean, what do you think? A disgraceful waste of money or an invaluable infrastructure project?
Look, I think Crossrail is one of those key projects in central London. It is necessary to take strains off the existing transport network, in particular Central Line, and it's going to mean that as many as 1.5 million more people will be within 40 minutes of London. However, I think more fundamentally what this project says about major projects is just the key lesson of over-optimism. It's this fact that it's been almost now £3 billion over budget. It's years over time. We had far too optimistic claims about when it would be finished up until the last moment, and a real failure of governance and oversight of this major project, which I think has really let it down and is costing the London economy billions of pounds.
Yeah, we're now looking at 2021 March. It's not a good look, is it? Matthew?
It's not a good look at all. And ultimately, I think the responsibility goes back to London Mayor Sadiq Khan. He is the chairperson of Transport for London, the wholly owned of Crossrail. He's the one who jet sets across the world, who bangs on about issues like Brexit, which are completely outside of his purview, instead of actually getting London moving.
OK, I mean, the Mayor of London isn't here to defend himself, so if we can just stay on point. I mean, Sam, just looking at some of these figures, it's already increased from a budget of £14.8 billion to £15.4 billion. It was given an extra £2 billion in December. I mean, people will be saying that money could be better spent elsewhere.
Look, there's absolutely an argument to be said that, you know, as colleagues, I don't often agree with the Adam Smith Institute, that there's been some serious failings of governance here. I mean, we've actually, as a union representing people that work on Crossrail at the moment, said that there should be a public inquiry. That's how serious we think this is. That's an awful lot of money that is going to need to be spent. And the thing is, as well, every year that Crossrail is not generating revenue, that's money not coming back into TfL and into London, and that's the compounded effect on the £750 million operating grant that was so brutally slashed by the government. You know, that is one of the reasons that we are in this crisis. I think that actually there is a very good argument about Crossrail. You know, London's economy is huge. We need to be investing into it, as we do in all parts of the country. You know, this, when it is actually running, will be fantastically, you know, helpful in connecting parts of, you know, the sort of dormitory towns outside of London in getting those workers into work. It will actually boost the economy. It's already creating lots of new jobs, and it will continue to create many, many jobs. And these are well-paid, highly skilled jobs at that, and that will continue for several generations to come. So if we don't invest now into the creaking infrastructure in this country and in London, then we are going to just store up even more expensive problems in the future. I think what we do need to be doing is to be saying that people like Mark Wilde, why isn't he falling on his sword? Why is he time and time again making excuses for this lack of delivery, you know, breaking out into a sort of war of words at different points with the Mayor of London? You know, actually someone needs to be taking responsibility for what hasn't happened, and what hasn't happened is proper governance, is proper oversight and delivery of this project in a more reasonable timescale. And the problem is, with that operating grant slashed by the government, it really just means that TfL's finances and therefore our members' jobs are at threat over the next few years.
Matthew, a couple of interesting points there from Sam. I mean, number one, when he talks about jobs, I mean, I'm seeing figures that Crossrail has employed somewhere in the region of 15,000 people. It's going to connect the east to the west. It's going to bring £42 billion to the UK economy. There are a lot of benefits. So is the initial pain worth it for the long-term success that that's going to be delivered?
Look, I would think so. I would think that the disruption that's caused by major infrastructure projects is substantial, and there is even substantial costs. I think it is important to consider whether or not the benefits do outweigh the costs. In this case, I would think so. Where I think that the failure has really been, and there's always this failure in delivery time and time again. We have to appreciate that to an extent when we're doing these major projects and try to learn from the experience. What we saw here, for example, was as early as January 2018, the independent oversight, Jacobs, produced a report saying that there was substantial risks of delays. That report was ignored by Transport for London, by Crossrail and by the Mayor. And then there were even delays going back to 2016 that weren't properly addressed. And I think the problem is when you've got these major projects, you've got this big nation-defining infrastructure, you need to ensure that you don't get overly optimistic about delivery targets and ensure that there's proper accountability and not just, as we've seen with this particular project, quite substantial bonuses for the executives who say that things are going on time when in fact it turns out that they're not.
Sam, what lessons can we learn from the Crossrail project?
I think we should never have a situation where companies continue to make millions and millions of pounds of profit but yet fail to deliver and failed sort of miserably to do that as well. I think we should have had much better and tighter contracts in which there were penalties for some of these companies for that kind of lack of delivery. I also think that we need to map out ahead on a longer scale the funding cycles for these kinds of things. TfL's finances would not be in such a difficult position if this project was being delivered on time, but they also would not be in such a difficult position if the government hadn't taken away that grant. Left London, one of the major global cities, but the only city in the Western world without a direct grant to run our transport network. That to me is not good for business, it's not good for passengers, it just means that prices of tickets get put up. This is not a good way to approach public transport infrastructure, and particularly if we want to tackle those major air pollution crisis problems that we have in London, we've got to get more and more people using public transport, and obviously Crossrail is a massive part of that. So I think the key lesson is that there needs to be a much more iron discipline from City Hall oversight of these top executives, so that people like Mark Wilde seem to be able to just get away scot-free, that doesn't happen. There need to be consequences, and I think that ethos needs to be transposed across the whole of TfL, not just on Crossrail.
Matthew, final thought from you?
Look, I think we ultimately have to put blame here on TfL and the Mayor's office. We have frozen fares at the moment, which is clearly not particularly sustainable, which is the key reason why the TfL is lacking any budgetary resources at the moment. But ultimately, if we want to do these major projects, we have to get them right and we have to appreciate the costs and benefits.
OK, Matthew, Sam, gentlemen, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.